Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Required Reading, where we're continuing our read of Gremlins 2, The New Batch, the novelization of the movie. It's written by David Bishop, based on the motion picture written by Charles Hass, and of course, also based on the characters created by Chris Columbus. This week we're reading chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5. If the Clamp Center could be said to have a heart, then the heart was the great man himself, Daniel Clamp. For it was his vision and his dreams, his entrepreneurship, his greed, and most of all, his money that built the place. However, if it had a brain, then it was down deep in the foundations of the huge building, in its nerve center. This was the nexus of electronic activity of the Clamp Center, monitored by technicians and a bank of computers worthy of the deck of Captain Kirk's USS Enterprise. Indeed, with all the monitors, it looked like the inside of a demented electronics store. Technicians hunched over meters, monitors, and switches, tracking the building's systems, like air traffic controllers track planes. In these monitors, various sections of the Clamp Center were revealed thanks to judiciously placed spy cameras. High tech, plus lunchtime smells of pastrami with mustard on rye. Into the dark subterranean electronic caverns moved Frank Forster, dark and sleek, like a shark sliding into its lair. He swam past the technicians, the monitors, his nose twitching at the pastrami, but not going in for the kill. There was fresher, bloodier meat around. Frank Forrester moved up to a man standing at the bank of controls. One panel of knobs was labeled "White Noise," and another "Voice." Forrester did not even bother to make a prefectory nod to the technician. "Let me hear the voices," he ordered. The technician's hands danced over the controls. Voices came up on the speakers. They sounded like voiceovers on slick TV commercials. They were, in fact, subliminal messages buried in the white noise mix, psychological tools to help create a smoothly functioning group of workers and consumers in a smoothly functioning clamp center. "I'm an honest kind of guy, and not stealing office supplies works for me and the way I live today," stated one dynamic male voice. On its heels followed a woman's voice, suggestively cooing. "When I save money for the Clamp organization, I feel good about myself overall." Followed by a cultured voice. "You know, I've been thinking Mr. Clamp would have made a great president." Frank Forrester smiled. "That's fine." Forrester turned to look out on the little sea of technology. All was functioning smoothly, efficiently, just the way Forrester liked it. Forrester wished people, even whole societies, could run smoothly and as effectively as the machines. Now there was a worthy goal for human evolution. A technician tapped him on the arm, bringing him out of his reverie. "It's a call for you, sir." Forrester turned and saw that the technician was pointing up at a monitor. There, in all its blandness, was the face of Daniel Clamp. Frank Forrester did not have to come to attention. He was always at attention. "Yes, Mr. Clamp," he said. "I'm going to a meeting about the Vermont thing. It looks like the takeover is going to happen." "That's terrific, sir." "No kidding. How many guys do you know have their own state? Did I show you that picture of the mountains?" "Yes, sir," said Forrester. "Tall." "While I'm in there, get that revolving door fixed downstairs. It shorted out last night while I had some money people here. Mrs. Tanaka's still spinning." Forrester flinched. Every glitch in his system was like a thorn in his side. "Yes, sir, I'll—" But Daniel Clamp was already gone, replaced by the Clamp logo. Forrester was hurled into a snit. He cast for some way to vent his thoroughly foul mood. He found it almost immediately. On a monitor over a technician's shoulder, a spy camera showed a stressed-out employee lighting a cigarette in a storeroom. Forrester gleefully reached over and stabbed a button. He hoisted a microphone to his thin-lipped mouth. "That's an unauthorized break period, pal," he barked into the mic. "You don't work here anymore." The startled male employee jumped about a foot into the air. He looked around like a trapped animal. He brought up the cigarette to his lips for another hit of nicotine. He looked, thought Forrester, as though this bozo might be used to hearing strange voices from nowhere. Good riddance. "We have a problem communicating here?" barked Forrester, tasting blood and finding it sweet. "You're gone. Clean out the desk. 1 hour. Thanks so much." Forrester put down the mic and moved on to look over the shoulder of another technician. The guy was turning up a switch marked oxygen. "What are you doing?" "There's not much air in the building, sir," said the technician, pointing at the quivering needles in the meters. Forrester sniffed and mentally calculated cost on the calculator embedded in his brain. "At 4 o'clock, people go into a slump. Then we give them oxygen." The technician, used to such cold-hearted attitudes, just shrugged. "Yes, sir." The oxygen knobs stayed where they were. Frank Forrester nodded with approval and then moved on, surveying his dominion. He looked out onto the bank of television screens and monitors, CRT screens, toggles, switches, and above all the white-coated technicians, fleshy robots at his beck and call. And Frank Forrester found it good. Upstairs, an entire half-floor of the Clamp Center had been rented by a biotechnology company called Splice of Life. Some people, including even Frank Forrester, had been doubtful about allowing a genetics lab in the building. Daniel Clamp had nixed them all on the subject, however, openly courting the group. There were rumors that, with the aid of DNA engineers, Clamp wanted to do to human beings what he had done with old black and white films. Improve them. An inter-office messenger named Lincoln Johnson entered the reception area of Splice of Life Incorporated. Link Johnson didn't like going to the Splice offices too much. It gave him the creeps. It looked at first like any New York office reception area, with potted plants, deep pile carpeting, fancy furniture, a pert and pretty secretary receptionist, poised like an ornament at her desk. Only from beyond the reception area you heard strange noises. Animal noises. Squeaking, scurrying, screeching, howling, scrapings, groans, thumps, and once Link had even heard a strangled scream. Yikes, it was enough to give a guy the willies. Today, as he walked in, he noticed that the receptionist was not at her desk, and an inner door was cracked open slightly. He couldn't help but peek in. What Link Johnson saw inside made his eyes open wide. The lab beyond, where beakers bubbled and Bunsen burners flamed, where computers beeped and tubing shook, was so high-tech it made the rest of the building look like a tenement in the South Bronx. Scientists in lab coats confirmed among themselves, the odd gadgets surrounding them looking like something from an alien planet. Rabbits, rats, and monkeys poked their noses from the bars of their cages, and there was something else now. Something that made the goosebumps on Link grow even larger. A tune. A singing tune, rising from among the menagerie of other noises like a flute soaring above the rest of the cacophonic symphony. That tune was sad and in a minor key, and it got to Link, burying itself in his mind. Unconsciously, he picked it up. He found himself whistling the tune, enjoying the way the melody slipped through his lips. "Can I help you?" Link's reverie was broken by the appearance of Peggy, the receptionist, walking briskly towards where he stood in the open doorway. Link gestured with his package. "Yeah, I got a delivery here." Peggy closed the door of the lab behind her and led him back to the desk to sign the receipt on the clipboard. "What kind of stuff do they do in there, anyway?" asked Link. "We're not supposed to talk about it." "That's for Dr. Catheter." "Yes, no problem. I'll sign for it." Link noticed that the petite brunette had a bad case of the sniffles. She pulled out a pink Kleenex tissue from its pack and honked her nose. Then she signed his clipboard and handed it back to him. He tore off her copy of the receipt and handed it to her. Okay, this copy is yours. Thanks. Funny, that tune wouldn't leave his head. He just kept on whistling it as he left the Splice of Life offices. He was happy to get out of there, though. This place scared the hell out of him. Life could be pretty wonderful, thought Dr. Cushing Catheter, head scientist of Splice of Life Incorporated, as he strolled back into the offices from his lunch break, especially when you dissected it. A spring in his lanky step, he bounded into the offices, ready for new biological adventures. Analysis, exploration, the true final frontier was not space, but the interstices of cells, the very warp and woof of intergenetic forces that made up the boundless mysteries of life. Dr. Catheter, said Peggy sweetly, piping up from behind the desk. This just came in for you. She handed him the package. He took it eagerly. Oh, good. This might be my malaria. He opened up the package, fumbled out a vial, and read the label. No, this is just rabies. I have rabies, and I was supposed to get the flu in this week. I think the flu's on back order. She took out a Kleenex and blew her nose. Thought Catheter. Could be worthwhile. He held out his hand. May I have that, Peggy? Oh, sure. She handed it over obediently. Catheter palmed the slimy thing with great interest and headed for the back office. Back order, he said, shaking his head. All a man wants is some fresh germs. He opened the door and walked into his own precious world of beakers and petri dishes, test tubes and needles. Ah, the smell of disease mingling with rubbing alcohol, the scent of life's strands splitting. Here was the very stuff of life. He lived for science, analysis, dissection. Smiling, his eyes lit up with an inner glow. The doctor traipsed past the cages, peering at the various variations on the themes of rat and rabbit and monkey. The animals looked back at him, and for a moment Catheter had the uneasy feeling that he saw hatred in their eyes. He dismissed the idea immediately. No, surely it was love, for Dr. Catheter was doing so much wonderful things for their species. At the very least, all the metal and plastic they were hooked up with made them fashion statements of their species. Catheter surveyed his lab with pride, and noted with satisfaction that his assistant, Wally Murphy, was hard at work. Wearing his usual blood-stained lab coat, Murphy was standing at his station, peering through an elaborate electron microscope. Dr. Catheter walked over as he noticed that the fluorescent lights at Wally's station were flickering. Hello, Wally, said Catheter. Your lights are flickering again, he said, crisping up his British accent for the right tone of authority. Wally looked up. His eyes blinked in the precise sync with the flickering of the fluorescent bulbs. Are they? Dr. Catheter turned to a table. Perched on its top was a collection of vegetable plants, attached to collecting tubes that fed into a central glass vial. How are they doing on the vegetable medley plant, Wally? I talked to the bird's eye people again. They're very excited. Wally sighed, scratching his splotchy face, a long-suffering researcher. We came close yesterday, Doctor, but I rejected the pimento. Dr. Catheter nodded. You'll get it, Wally. I'm very pleased about this bat project, though, said Wally, his expression lightening as he led Dr. Catheter towards a group of animal cages. You know, in some parts of this world, there are millions of bats. They could make terrific messengers like pigeons. Yes, but they only come out at night. That's what we're working on, sir, said Wally, obviously becoming more and more pleased at the prospect of showing off to his boss. They arrived at a cage where a resting bat was hanging upside down, an intravenous tube sticking out of the bat's flesh connected to a drip bottle whose label bore a shining sun logo. "This is a formula of vitamins, hormones, and Moroccan sunblock lotion. Soon these bats will be totally desensitized to bright light. Watch." Wally flipped the switch and a bright sun lamp shone on the bat. The little creature stretched luxuriously, warming itself in the rays like a basking cat. A smile tugged at the corners of Catheter's mouth. "Very nice." He was a tall man whose narrow features and crooked teeth made him look very much like Dracula of Hammer horror films. His eyes lit with a creepy light as he leaned towards Wally now. "I believe some of them feed on blood." Wally almost jumped out of his sneakers.
"Oh, that's a different bat, Doctor. South American."
Dr. Catheter was disappointed. "Ah, well, good work nonetheless, Wally." As Catheter started to move on, another scientist approached Wally.
"Wally, could you let me have some of the growth hormone? I'm a little short."
Catheter did not get the joke. He went to the other side of the lab. Other projects to supervise, other research to see. Amongst more cages and tubing, and a brisk smell of fur and droppings, stood two scientists, hard at work, one with his back to Catheter. They were both a little below median height. "Hello, Lewis," said Catheter to the man facing him. "Hi, Doctor." Lewis was a cheerful, smiling man who looked like a younger version of Art Buchwald, minus the cigar. "How's the cloning work coming?" Martin, the other scientist, turned around. He, too, looked like Art Buchwald without the cigar. "Really well, Doctor," they answered in unison. The twins traded words in the streams of thought as though they shared the same brain. "Say, Doctor, look at this." "I think you'll find this interesting." They walked on down the aisle, and for the first time Dr. Catheter consciously noticed the minor key melody hanging in the air. It had been obfuscated before by the usual sound of Wagner's Ride of the Valkyrie hammering in his brain. On a lab table was a covered cage. Martin pulled off the cloth covering it. Dr. Catheter raised his narrow, slanted eyebrows. In the wire cage, looking up with the most intelligent expression that Catheter had ever seen on an animal before, was something that looked like a stuffed toy merchandiser's dream. It was an odd but cute little creature, with delightfully long ears, a tiny button nose, an expressive little mouth, and moist, doleful eyes. Its arm wore a black armband as though it were in mourning. But of course Catheter realized that was impossible. Must be some sort of identification tag from another lab. "Some sort of rodent, apparently," said Lewis. "And it can't take bright light," said Martin. "Watch this, Doctor," said Lewis. He opened the door of the cage and then scooted a Sony portable CD boombox closer to it. He clicked it on, and a hot dance tune snapped from the speakers. The frown immediately left the creature's feature, and he jumped through the opening of the cage and started to dance playfully to the beat. Catheter frowned. "Cute, isn't he?" He peered suspiciously at the creature. "That may be genetic." "We're not sure yet." When Catheter looked back to examine the creature, he saw that it was edging along the table, clearly trying to make a break for it. "Not so fast, pal." As Martin snapped the music off, Catheter grabbed the thing before it could run away. It was soft and warm, like a heated plush toy. He pushed it brusquely back into its cage, and then turned a frown towards his associates. "What's wrong with you two? He almost made a break for it."
"Sorry, sir,"
said Martin. "How are you going to proceed with him?" Lewis answered.
"Cell samples tomorrow. Tissue cultures Thursday," finished Martin.
"And then there's body structure," mused Catheter. He smiled. And for that, my little friend, we'll just have to cut you. Chapter 6. Billy was too preoccupied to take much notice of the messenger who walked past his desk, whistling a familiar tune. He was still upset over having been ordered to put trees in his sketch of the Clamp Corporation's Chinatown project, when he knew that it was a lie. The developer was not planning any trees on that piece of the valuable real estate. Billy did what he always did when he was troubled. He talked to Kate. He was trying to talk to Kate over the high-tech video phone on his desk, and it was skewing her image enough to make her look like one of Picasso's more abstract renderings of the female face. So then she says I have to draw in a bunch of... he was trying to say to Kate. Then the lights went out. One damn thing after another. My lights went out, he told Kate. Over the phone, Kate said, Jump around. What? You sat still for too long. The building thinks you left. It's saving energy. Jump around. Billy shrugged. He stood up from his chair and jumped to the left, then to the right. The lights went back on, but the vibrations of his jumping made the video go dead. Nothing works here, said Billy with great exasperation. He reached down to redial, but at that moment the messenger passed by again, this time closer, and Billy heard his whistling loud and clear. All at once Billy recognized the tune. It was as though someone had thrown a bucket of cold water over him and then given him a high-voltage hotfoot. It was Gizmo's song. Gizmo's sad, wistful, beautiful melody. He swept around and grabbed the guy who was whistling it by his shirt sleeve. Where did you hear that? Huh? That music, where did you hear it? Oh, the messenger guy hummed the tune this time. Like that, right? Isn't that by Sting? No, it's not by Sting. Billy was dogged and insistent. Think! Where did you... The guy's eyes lit up. Oh, hey, I know. I was up at that laboratory, the one on 18, and someone was, humming it. Did you see who it was? It was in the back. Gizmo was here. Gizmo the Mogwai. But in Splice of Life, Billy had heard absolutely dreadful stories about that place. Stories of screaming animals and maniacal mad scientist laughter issuing from behind locked doors. Stories so terrifying they could make you lose the ability to speak simple phrases or eat solid food. Leaving the astonished messenger behind, Billy Peltzer took off for the offices of Splice of Life, hoping against hope that he was in time, that he could rescue Gizmo before anything happened to his dear good friend. He'd figured the scam on the way up. Billy Peltzer strode into the receptions area of Splice of Life, lugging a box of tools he swiped along the way. How you doing? He said blithely to the secretary receptionist at the front desk. I hear your copier's down. It is? Oh yeah, some guy called. Where is it? The bemused secretary pointed. It's back there. She was pointing to beyond the door to the lab. Billy tipped an imaginary hat and hurried on in. He was immediately assaulted by the smell of lab animals, mixed with the overpowering stench of chemicals. He noticed the ranks of lab equipment, then the cages housing the animals, and his heart immediately went out to the poor living experiments. The worst of it was that Gizmo was here. You could sense the fear that permeated the air here. The part of that fear, part of that terror, could belong to Gizmo. Concentrating on his ruse, Billy hefted the toolbox over to the Xerox machine, pried open a side panel, and peered inside. He pulled out a screwdriver and tried to make it like a repairman. As he worked, he tuned into the conversation of the two of the lab technicians. They were twins, he realized, and both looked like Art Buchwald without the cigar. One was holding up one of the huge white rats that scientists always used in labs by the gross. The other was injecting a piece of cheese with a hypodermic needle, labeled with a lightning insignia. Another apparently senior scientist moved among them, watching what they were doing. One of the junior mad scientists said,
This is the most interesting bioelectrical work I've ever been involved in. Here you go, boy. He fed a bit of the inoculated cheese to the rat. Think of it. Millions of rats in New York, and everyone hates them. But if one of them could power a portable radio for a month, one touched the base of the light bulb to the rat's fur. The bulb glowed weakly. The thin, older scientist touched the animal. An electrical spark jumped to his finger. He pulled it back, shocked but clearly happy. Definite progress, fellows, if we could make it safe to touch them. Good grief, what were these guys doing? There was no time to waste. If Gizmo the Mogwai was here, he had to find the poor guy before these bozos got a hold of him. Just then Billy heard, very faintly, Gizmo's song. Gizmo was here. Billy moved back, following the trail of Gizmo's voice. It got stronger the farther back he got among the cages. Billy answered it with a whistle. He lifted the cover of one of the cages and jumped back in shock. Inside was a huge hairy spider. He moved on, searching, and monkeys chattered at him as he passed. Gizmo's singing became stronger, and in a major key now. Gizmo knew that Billy was here. It came from that covered cage there. As Billy moved closer, he saw an array of sharp gleaming scalpels and other surgical instruments on a felt cloth by the cage. What were they going to do to Gizmo? Instantly, Billy Peltzer knew what he had to do. He turned around and started back in the direction he had come. Only this time, as he passed the chattering monkeys, he unlatched their cages. Instantly, each monkey scurried to freedom. A mass of them tore down the aisle, knocking over beakers and vials as they went, creating total pandemonium in their wake. Billy quickly squatted back at the Xerox machine and looked up surprised and innocent. "Theodore!" cried one of the Bushwald clones as he looked down at the scampering spider monkey. "What are you doing out?" "Halvin!" yelled the other. "Put down that DNA!" They chased after the monkeys, adding to the confusion. Billy hurried back to Gizmo's cage. He grabbed Gizmo and stuffed him into the toolbox and hurried out of the lab. He ducked into a men's room and leaned against a tile wall, pulling in quick breaths. Then he lifted the toolbox onto the sink and opened it. "Gizmo!" he said, his heart filling with a torrent of emotion. He felt for this furry little friend as he remembered all that they had been through together. It was clear from his melting expression that Gizmo felt exactly the same way. A boy in his mogwai. "Hey, Kai, did you miss me?" Billy asked teasingly. Gizmo tried to act coy, rolling his moist sole of eyes and shyly hedging away, doing a little soft shoe out of reserve. But suddenly he turned full to Billy and simply fell, open-armed, into Billy's embrace. "Billy!" Gizmo squeaked with joy and delight. Billy chuckled. "Yeah, me too." He put Gizmo up on a towel shelf. "Let's put you up here so we don't want to get any water on you." Gizmo twittered, indicating his total agreement. "Gizmo, what were those guys doing back there?" The look that washed over Gizmo's face was one of complete terror. Billy cringed. "That bad, huh? How did you get in there? What happened to Mr. Wing?" Gizmo gave him a forlorn look. Mournfully, he pointed a petite finger at the black armband. Poor Mr. Wing must have passed away, thought Billy. But then, he was a very, very old man. We all had to come to our time eventually. "Oh, I'm sorry." But then, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted him. Voices echoed from the anteroom between the bathroom and the hall. "Quick, get back in here!" Gizmo didn't seem particularly eager to get back into the toolbox, but Billy grabbed him and stuffed him in. Gizmo twittered in objection. "Shh, just a minute." He shoved the toolbox aside, and then turned on a faucet and furiously washed his hands. He heard someone's shoes click behind him, and an overbearing presence neared. Nervously, he turned around, slopping a liberal amount of water back out of the sink and onto the man's black shiny shoes. It was Mr. Forrester, with a glower on his mug that would freeze lava at 20 feet. "You're wetting my shoes, Peltzer," he said. "Oh, no!" Hastily, Billy ripped the paper towel from its place and started to dive down to dry off Forrester's shoes. "I'm sorry, sir. Let me—" "Stand up, Peltzer. Come with me." Billy grabbed the toolbox and followed Forrester to the anteroom, where one of the Forrester's assistants waited holding a clipboard. Forrester pointed to the sign on the bathroom door. "Do you know what that sign means, Peltzer?" The sign showed a picture of a man. "It means men's bathroom." "What is the man holding?" "In the bathroom?" "No, you idiot! On the sign!" Billy peered closer. Oh, yes, he hadn't noted. The man seemed to be holding a little briefcase, sir. "That's right, because this is an executive washroom. I don't think you belong in there, do you, Peltzer?" "Oh, well, my mistake." Forrester pulled out his leatherette folder, took out the barcode reader, and ran the end over Billy's chest insignia again. He pushed a button and a paper tape readout churned out. Forrester ripped it out and looked down at it. "Lateness infractions," he read. "More washroom violations, and my goodness, look at those SAT scores." Billy craned his head. "They're in there?" Forrester snapped the folder shut. In Billy's hands, the toolbox rattled. "What's in the box, Peltzer?" "Well, as a matter of fact, it's art supplies." He rattled the box harder, hoping Gizmo would get the message. "I'm mixing paints." "I hope those aren't clamp paints, mister." No, sir. I bought it from the arts and crafts store down in the mall. You want to see the receipt?" Forrester stared at him hard, and for a moment Billy thought he was going to call his bluff. "Very well, but in the future be more mindful of the rules, Mr. Peltzer." "Yes, sir." Billy backed away, then headed down the hall, eager to get away. Forrester watched Billy go, then turned to his flunky. I think, Reynolds, our random drug search later on should be very interesting." The assistant jotted down notes on his clipboard. "Got it, sir." Forrester smiled. "Get him," he thought. Okay, guys, so that was chapters 5 and 6 of Gremlins 2, The New Batch. I know ordinarily I don't do this, but one thing I kind of wanted to mention that I thought was interesting is a couple of notes about Dr. Catheter, which, if you've seen the movie, you know, is played by Christopher Lee. Which some people might know from the Lord of the Rings movies. Others might know him actually from this reference that they make in, it's a little Easter egg here, that they talk about how Dr. Catheter looks like Dracula from the Hammer films. Well, that's because the same person that portrayed Dr. Catheter in the movie Gremlins 2, The New Batch was actually Dracula in the Hammer films, at least I think a few of them. The other thing I thought that was interesting is that, oh my gosh, I think it was the Hammer films, obviously it was Dracula, and you had Dracula, and then you had Van Helsing, and I believe Peter Cushing played Van Helsing and was also a longtime friend of Christopher Lee. So it was just interesting to me that Dr. Catheter, his first name is Cushing, and I'm guessing, again, that's an Easter egg to the Dracula, the Hammer films, where they played two opposite characters there. And I don't think that's in the movie, so that's kind of interesting. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I thought it was cool. Well, I know it's taken a little bit for us to get here, but I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll get another couple of chapters out as soon as we can. But in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and keep reading.
Clamp Cable Network now leaves the air. We hope you have enjoyed our programming, but more importantly, we hope you have enjoyed life.